Welcome back. This is part 7 of our online tutorial series, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at Designer's Interface Editor. So the Interface Editor is essentially an editor where you can create an interface for touchscreen products, namely the TPS and the TPC. And by doing so, you can obviously give your user a way of interacting and controlling the system. The Interface Editor is very easy to use, doesn't require any code, it's all graphical, but you can still make a robust and functional interface bespoke to your project. We're going to start off by clicking New at the top here. That's going to open up a wizard. It's going to ask us for some details, so I'm just going to fill those in. The first one's the name. Obviously, that's the name of your interface. The second one is the orientation. So that's going to be the orientation of the screen, whether it's landscape or portrait. And finally, you can bring in a font file. Just a quick note about this, if you are planning on writing text in your interface that's in a different language, such as Arabic or Mandarin, or actually any non-Latin based text, you're going to need to make sure that you bring in a font file that supports that text first, just so that we can have the characters populate correctly on screen. Once you're happy, click Next. It's then going to ask you to pick from one of our default themes. Just a quick thing on this, you can make your own themes and you can export them from Designer, bring them in at a later point, and as I said before, you can make them completely bespoke to a project. But for now, we're just going to use one of the default themes and we're going to start from there. So pick a theme that you like. I'm going to go with a dark theme. Click Next. And then it's going to ask you to set up your page properties. So our first page on our interface is going to be our home page. So I'm going to call it home, and I'm going to use the home icon. We can add more pages in later, but for now we're just going to start off like so. And then finally, it's going to ask you what kind of background image you want to set to that page. So I'm going to stick with the default image at the moment, but you can bring in your own down here, or alternatively, if you want to use a color or a gradient, you can do so as well. Click Next, then it's going to ask us for our default layout. Now, you can have a blank layout and you can draw buttons and sliders and color pickers on, but for the moment, I just want to get us set up, and we're going to use the 9 button layout. Once that's selected, click Next. And finally, it's going to ask you what type of navigation you want. So you can use some of the buttons that we've just created to navigate between pages. But what I really like to do is I like to use the page switcher. This is a little bar at the bottom or the top of the screen that has some icons which will allow your user to easily navigate to a different page. Once that's selected, click Finish. And then the interface will build. So just a quick look around. If we select one of the elements on screen, you'll notice in the right hand corner we have all of its properties. The first property that we can fill out is a caption. So this is the text that we want to write on the button. So I'm going to call that preset 1. Then I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll do the first 5. So once I'm done with the first 5, I'm just going to create another caption for the SIF button, and that's going to be to turn the system all off. You can call that whatever you like. So just some more key things to go through. The key that appears underneath this is quite important. We're going to use this in our next tutorial to link these buttons to what we call a trigger. Okay, so just remember that each button has a unique key, and those keys will be identifiers for these buttons in the next tutorial. Underneath the button key, you have something called a startup state. You can kind of think of this as like a theme for a button. So if I go ahead and I select the red theme, you can see that it obviously changes color. And sometimes that can be quite a good idea to apply those to specific buttons that have certain functions, such as my all off button. So underneath that, there are 1 or 2 more features that we need to go through. The XY coordinates, which will obviously be its position, its width and its height, which is its size. You have the ability to load in an image. You can give it a font size. You can horizontally align it or vertically align it. And of course, we have some extra features down here, which is going to be how the button reacts to a certain touch or press. Once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and just get rid of the bottom buttons using backspace. One thing that I should note though, if you try and grab a button and move it, by default, it's locked. What you can do, however, is you can use the lock button up here to unlock items. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and select all of the buttons and you can resize them. Or if you wanted to, you can actually move the button independently. So by and large, that's pretty much it for the buttons on screen. What I want to quickly do though is just have a look at the page switcher underneath. So if I select the page switcher, we have a different set of options that come up. We can obviously show the page's name if we want to. We can change the text color, we can change the background opacity, change the gradient, and if we want to as well, we can also show the time, which I think is a nice little feature at the bottom. So once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and now you can add another page to the interface. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to go up to the top left-hand corner, and where it says new, we can add in a new page. So just like before, we're going to give this a name. This time I'm going to call this overrides, because this is going to override the system. I'm going to pick a different icon. I'm going to stick with the same background image for consistency. But this time I'm going to go ahead, I'm actually going to select a blank page. I'm going to show you how to draw on elements. So go ahead, click next. Do I want to add this page to the existing page switcher? Yeah, probably a good idea. So I'm just going to go ahead, keep that selected and press finish. And there we go. I've now got a second page, and obviously this is a blank canvas for me to then go ahead and draw elements on. So for this page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add a color picker, a slider, and then I'm going to also add a button just so that the user can clear their overrides. So you can draw elements on by going up to the top bar, selecting one of our control elements. So that's a button, slider, color picker, label, keypad, or even a clock. And then I can go ahead, with that selected, I can draw out the size of the color picker or any element that I want. Once I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and maybe draw a slider this time. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a button. It's okay if these are not perfectly aligned at the moment, because what we can do is we can select them all, and then you're going to want to use one of the alignment tools up here. So I'm going to use the horizontal alignment tool, and that's just going to align everything down the center. Once I'm happy with that, I might just update this. I might call this clear. So one other thing that I might want to do is show the values on the slider. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on the slider. That's going to bring up its properties on the right hand side, and you'll see there's an option here called show value. And now that's going to now give me a percentage representation of the value which the slider is at. So one of the things that I want to quickly show you just before we move on is the theme editor. Now, the theme editor allows you to make your own themes and styles for each and every single element within the interface editor. So you can get to that by going at the top here, click on theme editor, and you'll notice immediately on the left hand side you have all of the different items that you can use on an interface. So we're going to select the button. And if I want to make my own look, my own style for a button, I can do so by first clicking on the plus button here. If I scroll down, I'll have a new item state. I can rename that to Ryan's button. And then I can go ahead and I can edit the parameters down at the bottom here so that I can have my button look the way that I want it to. So I can change things such as the gradient of the background. And of course I can change, if I want the text being bold and the border colors and various different things, but you can have a look through that at your own pace. We can also bring in more background images, and if we want to, we can even bring in our own icons so we can use those as well. Once you're happy with that, you can click done. And then if you go to the startup state, you should see that your new startup states appear here in order with the rest of the states. I'm now going to just have a look at one final thing, which is just uploading your interface to your controller and giving it some security. You can give your interface some basic security by going to the manage button up here. Once you've opened that, it'll ask you if you want to have an unlock code for it. And once you've done that, you'll also need to set a lock timeout. So I'm going to say 1 minute. What this is going to do, after a minute, this is going to lock it. It will take the interface to a keypad, and the user will have to put in a key so they can get back into the interface. And then finally, to upload that to your touchscreen device, just make sure it's associated by going to touch devices. Make sure the interface is obviously associated with the correct controller. And once you've done that, just go ahead and do an upload. And of course, the command to do that again is either Control U or Apple U. Okay, thanks for that, and I hope to see you in the next one.